Welcome to this trip through one of the most disturbing cases in Virginia's history. Please let me know where you're watching from and what time it is when you listen to this narration before we start. We want to know what times of day or night and where these documented accounts go. In 1962, the Richmond Historical Society got 3 bundles of letters that had been damaged by water and were found while renovating a cellar in New Kent County. The writing was pretty but rushed, and the ink had faded to a rusty brown on yellowed paper. The construction foreman wrote in a note that the packages had been sealed behind a fake wall, along with a small wooden box with a silver locket and a few bone buttons in it. The archivist for the society who looked at them first noticed that the pages had a strange smell, like dried roses and copper. The letters were only signed with the initials C.C., but later research would connect them to a widow named Clara Carter, who got the Willow Creek Plantation in 1862. What started as a normal cataloging of letters from the Civil War era would soon turn into something much more disturbing. This case stayed hidden in academic archives for decades, only being mentioned in footnotes of obscure historical journals until 1965. When the documents were mysteriously taken off the market. The Willow Creek Plantation was located 17 miles east of Richmond, in a valley between rolling hills and thick Virginia woods. The main house was a 3-story federal-style mansion with 6 white columns holding up the front porch. Behind the kitchen gardens were 12 worker cabins arranged in a semicircle. County records show that the property had 4,200 acres of tobacco fields that went all the way to the Chickahominy River. Jeremiah Carter, who had made his money in shipping before moving to farming, built the estate in 1784. The plantation had been in the hands of 3 generations of Carter men by 1862. After her husband Thomas died from typhoid fever in April of that year, Clara Carter became the only owner. In the summer of 1862, the first reports of strange things happening at Willow Creek started to come in. Reverend James Whitfield of the nearby St. Mary's Parish wrote a letter saying that he had been called to the plantation to talk about funeral plans for Thomas Carter. When he got there, he found the widow to be unnaturally calm and mostly worried about proving her full legal authority over the estate and its 37 residents. The Reverend said that most widows asked for prayer meetings or spiritual guidance, but Mrs. Carter instead asked about the theological idea of dominion and whether the Bible gave property owners full control over their holdings. Whitfield wrote to a co-worker that he left the meeting with a strange sense of unease, as if I had been measured for some purpose I could not discern. Not only were the events that followed the Willow Creek case disturbing, but they were also kept completely secret from the public. Even though the plantations next door kept in touch and visited each other, Willow Creek became more and more cut off after Thomas Carter died. The record shows that Clara Carter canceled her standing invitations to Richmond Society events, turned down calls from families in the area, and fired the white overseer who had been in charge of the plantation for 14 years, saying she would take care of everything herself. County tax records show that she did make one big change to how the estate ran. She sold off most of the female workers to plantations further south and bought more male workers from farms that were having trouble making ends meet as the Civil War got worse. By the fall of 1862, Willow Creek had a very unusual number of people for a plantation at the time. 34 men between the ages of 20 and 35, and only 3 older women who worked in the main house. The records show that Clara Carter personally chose each new acquisition and sometimes traveled as far as 80 miles to check out possible transfers. A note in the ledger of labor trader Wilbur Hammond says that Mrs. Carter was very picky about physical condition and turned down several good workers in favor of others, even though they cost more. Ezekiel Johnson, one of the 3 house servants who managed to leave in December 1862, is the only person who was inside Willow Creek at the time who has left a record of what happened. An officer in the Union Army recorded his testimony in 1865, and it is still in military archives. It talks about how the plantation's normal operations began to change in small ways after Thomas Carter died. When they came back from the tobacco fields, the field workers had to follow strange daily routines that were not common at the time. They also got new clothes that were of better quality than what they usually got. Johnson's descriptions of the selection nights that happened every other Sunday were more troubling. Clara Carter would call all the men to the front lawn of the main house after dark. Johnson says that the men would stand in a line while Mrs. Carter, sometimes with another woman whose face was covered, would walk slowly in front of them, looking closely at each man by lantern light. Then, one or two people would be chosen to do special duties in the main house for the week, while the rest went back to their cabins. The other workers didn't see the people who were chosen again until the next Sunday, when they would be chosen again. Johnson said that the men who came back from the main house never talked about what happened there. Instead, they seemed to be getting more and more withdrawn and would stare at nothing for long periods of time while they worked in the fields. Some people who worked in the house started to act strangely, touching their throats over and over again, and this behavior spread to others who had worked there. People in the area may have only whispered about Willow Creek if it weren't for what happened in January 1863. A bad winter storm hit the area, bringing a lot of snow that kept many rural homes cut off for weeks. In early February, when the roads were finally clear, a merchant bringing supplies to Willow Creek said he found the main gate locked, and no one answered his calls. He was worried, so he told the county sheriff, who put together a small group to look into it. A report would be written up about what they found, but it would quickly be classified and put away. It wouldn't be seen again until a courthouse inventory in 1967. On February 9, 1863, Sheriff William Tanner and 4 deputies went to the main house. It was very quiet, even though it was noon and field work should have been going on. The smokehouse chimneys were cold, and there were no animals in the nearby pastures. They knocked on the door several times but got no answer, so they broke in through a side door. The sheriff's report says that the inside was very well kept, but there were no signs of normal life. There was a fancy table set for 12 in the formal dining room, with fine china and crystal glasses filled with wine that had turned into a dark residue. The silver holders for the candles had burned down to stubs. The search party found the most disturbing thing when they got to the 3rd floor of the main house. The heavily redacted report says that they found a big, round room that looked like it had been made by taking down the walls between 3 bedrooms. There were 12 chairs in the room, all arranged in a circle. Each chair had a white cloth on it with strange stains on it. There was a wooden platform in the middle that was about 18 inches off the floor and had strange fixtures that the report didn't explain very well. No one in the search party could figure out what the symbols on the platform meant. Later, an expert from Richmond College would say that they were a mix of West African religious images and corrupted Christian images. No sign of Clara Carter or the 37 people who had lived and worked at Willow Creek was found. The worker cabins were empty, with neatly made beds and personal items still in place. A pot of stew that was left out in the shared kitchen had gone bad, which means the person who disappeared had been gone for at least 2 weeks. The only possible clue was found in Clara Carter's bedroom, a leather-bound journal with entries that stopped suddenly on January 17th. The last entry said, "The ceremony will be over tonight. I have been getting ready for 3 months, and now the stars are in the right place. What was promised will be delivered." The investigation that came after didn't find many answers. In the weeks leading up to the disappearances, nearby Plantation said they hadn't seen or heard anything strange at Willow Creek. There was nothing found after a thorough search of the woods nearby and dragging of a pond nearby. The case may have gotten more attention if it hadn't happened at the same time as a big Confederate military campaign that was taking up a lot of people's time. In just a few weeks, deserters from both armies stole from the abandoned plantation. By spring, a fire of unknown origin had completely destroyed the main house, leaving only the brick chimneys standing. If those water-stained letters hadn't been found in 1962, the story of Clara Carter and Willow Creek Plantation might have been lost forever. The letters, mostly between Clara and a woman in New Orleans known only as M, showed new sides of the case that turned it from a strange disappearance into something much more unsettling. Scholars who looked at the letters before they were taken down from public view say that they showed Clara Carter's involvement with what seemed to be a small, secretive group of wealthy Southern women who practiced what they called the old religion. This was a mix of European occultism and rituals they said they learned from Caribbean traditions. In a letter from September 1862, Clara wrote, "I have begun the preparations as you instructed. The men have been chosen based on the criteria of youth, strength, and the specific measurements you outlined. I have let go of Overseer Phillips because his Christian beliefs would never allow what must be done. The circle now has 11 members, with me as the 12th. 3 of them have been especially open to the procedures and have moved on to the second level of preparation. Marianne Woodward, a historian who spent 3 months studying the letters in early 1963 before they were suddenly reclassified, wrote one academic paper that said Clara Carter had joined a group that practiced a kind of esoteric ritual where wealthy women used their social status to undermine the usual power structures of Southern society. We are only waiting for you to arrive to start the ceremonial practices," another piece from November said. It went on to say, the men show the expected resistance at first, but the tincture you gave them makes them more compliant. 3 historical journals turned down Woodward's paper before it was published in an obscure anthropological quarterly where it didn't get much attention. Woodward took a job as a teacher in Switzerland 6 months later and never brought it up again. The last piece of the Willow Creek mystery came to light in 1968, when building a highway bypass 17 miles southeast of Richmond uncovered a site with the remains of 34 adult men. The limited forensic examination that was done before the site was quickly paved over showed that the remains had been arranged in a strange way that investigators couldn't explain. Clara Carter was the body at the center of the arrangement, as shown by dental records. The official report listed the cause of death as undetermined, though unofficial notes from the county medical examiner mentioned unusual markings and evidence suggesting they had been preserved in some manner before burial. The examiner's note that all 34 male remains had been arranged in a way that seemed intentional and ceremonial was probably the most disturbing thing. The case was officially closed in 1969, with the deaths attributed to unknown natural causes, possibly disease. The remains that were found were taken to a part of Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond that doesn't have a marker. No one from the Carter family came forward to claim Clara's body, and records show that the plantation land was eventually sold at auction to pay off unpaid taxes. There is now a suburban development where Willow Creek used to be, but there is no sign to show what happened there. The Virginia Historical Society has a small collection of artifacts in its basement archives that are the only physical reminders of the estate. These include a silver locket with a small picture of a stern-looking woman with pale eyes, 3 bone buttons, and 1 page from Clara Carter's journal. The rest of the journal was lost in a storage fire in 1972. There are many different theories about what happened at Willow Creek that historians and folklorists have put forward. Some people think that Clara Carter, who was suddenly free from the limits of marriage in a society that gave women little freedom, just started acting strangely, maybe because of the extreme social stresses of the Civil War. Some people say that the letters show that there was a bigger network of secret activities going on among some groups of the Southern elite, hidden behind the facade of Christian decency. Some researchers have suggested a more ordinary explanation, that Clara Carter and her workers ran away from the war as it got closer, possibly going west, and that the remains that were found had nothing to do with the people who lived on the plantation. The Willow Creek case is especially disturbing not only because of the strange circumstances surrounding the disappearances, but also because the story was kept quiet for more than 100 years. Daniel Freeman, a researcher, tried to find the original Carter letters in 1978 for a book about strange things that happened during the Civil War. He was told that they had been moved to the National Archives in 1965. The National Archives, on the other hand, had no record of getting them. Freeman's later Freedom of Information Act requests were turned down because the documents he wanted didn't exist. His appeal said that he had photocopies of Marianne Woodward's original research notes that mentioned the letters, but this proof was not enough to prove that the requested materials existed. In 1984, an old woman in New Orleans called the Virginia Historical Society and said she had more letters related to Clara Carter. This was the most recent news in the Willow Creek story. The Society's visitor log says that a curator went to Louisiana to meet with the woman, but there is no record of what they talked about or whether they got any documents. Dr. Thomas Blackwood, the curator, unexpectedly retired the next month and moved to Arizona. He refused all requests for interviews until he died in 1989. Today, the Willow Creek Plantation is mostly just a footnote in research about Virginia during the Civil War. There is no physical evidence left of what happened there in the winter of 1862, because suburban development has completely changed the site. We may never know exactly what happened to Clara Carter and the 34 men she was in charge of. The partial evidence that is still around scattered letters, a single page from a journal, and a burial site that was quickly paved over points to a story that is much more complicated and disturbing than the official story of disease or desertion. The most chilling thing about the Willow Creek case is how well it shows how selective historical memory can be. Events that are at odds with the preferred stories of a time can be systematically erased, not through complex plots, but through the simple workings of bureaucracy, lost papers, rejected academic papers, and the natural human tendency to make sense of things that don't make sense. The story of Clara Carter, a widow who may have used her position to gain unusual power over people she thought were below her, and who may have taken part in ceremonies that turned the strict hierarchies of her time upside down, but ultimately strengthened them, makes us question what we think we know about the past. For people who study the darker parts of American history, Willow Creek is not only an unsolved mystery, but also a reminder of how much is still hidden behind official stories. The 34 men who went missing from the plantation that winter night, whose names were only written down as property in ledger books that have long since turned to dust, are just a few of the many stories that will never be fully told. Their final experiences, whatever they may have been, remain locked in a silence that no historical investigation can penetrate. The land where Willow Creek used to be is still quiet. Families in the suburbs build their lives there without knowing what the soil under their homes used to see. Sometimes, a homeowner digging in their garden will find a piece of handmade brick or a rusty tool, which are physical reminders of the people who worked that same land in very different situations. There is no physical evidence left of Clara Carter and her last ceremony, the circle of chairs on the 3rd floor, or anything that happened there during the conjunction of stars she was so looking forward to. It seems that something happened at Willow Creek Plantation, but only these random bits of evidence that have survived by chance, and maybe because history is too stubborn to stay completely buried, show that something happened. In the conclusion of her little-known paper on the Carter letters, Historian Marianne Woodward may have written the best epitaph for the case. "What happened at Willow Creek may not have been an exception," she wrote. "It may have been a more obvious example of the power dynamics that were at work in the whole plantation system, where people were treated like things, and the lines between owning labor and owning a person became dangerously blurred. In this light, Clara Carter's apparent ceremonies, whatever their specific nature, can be seen as just a more clear expression of the social structures that were present, if usually unspoken, throughout the society in which she lived." Rebecca Marshall, a doctoral student, found a stack of newspaper clippings in the personal collection of former Sheriff William Tanner in 1975 while looking into how the police worked during the Civil War. One of them was a short article from the Richmond Examiner from March 1863 that talked about an unusual weather event that travelers along the Old Church Road, the same road that would have led to Willow Creek Plantation, saw. 3 different people said that on the night of January 17th, the last day Clara Carter wrote in her journal, they saw a column of pale light coming from the plantation that could be seen for almost 20 miles. The newspaper said it was caused by electrical problems in the air and said that similar things had happened during severe winter storms in the past. More revealing was a personal note penned by Tanner himself, tucked between the newspaper clippings. It said, "What we saw in the upper room is beyond Christian understanding. The strange arrangements, the purpose. May God forgive us for not looking into it sooner, and may He grant that no one finds out what is in the eastern woods. We have all agreed that no official record should contain the full account, for the public good and the dignity of the deceased." The note was signed and dated February 10, 1863, the day after the official search of the plantation. When you compare this mention of discoveries in the eastern woods to land surveys from the 1950s, it takes on a whole new meaning. These surveys show that the site found in 1968 was about 3 miles east of where the Willow Creek property line would have been. This makes it look like Sheriff Tanner and his deputies may have known where it was all along, but chose not to disturb or document it for reasons they took to their graves. It's also troubling that the official county census from 1862 said there were 37 workers at Willow Creek, but the site only had 34 male remains. We still don't know where the 3 female housemaids that Ezekiel Johnson wrote about were. After he testified to Union officers in 1865, Johnson himself disappeared from history. His last known statement suggests that he knew something he didn't want to share. He said, "There are things that no man should speak of, not if he wants to die peacefully. I have told what I can bear to tell. The rest will go with me to Judgment Day, when the Lord must decide whether my silence was cowardice or mercy." The woman, known only as M in Clara Carter's letters, is another unresolved thread. In 1992, Eliza Montgomery, a historian working at the New Orleans Public Archives, found property records for Malene Robichaud, a French Quarter resident who had been married twice and owned a small import business that specialized in botanical specimens and cultural artifacts from Haiti and Jamaica. Ship manifests show that Robichaud traveled to Caribbean ports often between 1857 and 1863, and she often came back with crates labeled ethnological materials. Tax records show that she wrote letters to at least 6 wealthy widows in the southern states, including Clara Carter. Robichaud is especially interesting because she, like Clara Carter and the 34 men of Willow Creek, suddenly disappeared in early 1863. In March of that year, her French Quarter home was discovered empty, with the table set for dinner and a letter that was only half finished on her writing desk. The ceremonial circle is almost done. Virginia has proven to be more fertile ground than we could have hoped for. I leave tomorrow to oversee the end. The sentence is still not finished. According to police records from New Orleans, investigators found a secret room behind Robichaud's library that held a strange collection of items. These included carved wooden figures with movable limbs, jars of preserved plants with labels in a code that was never cracked, and a leather-bound book written in a mix of French, Latin, and Yoruba, as identified by a linguist who was called in to help. A Catholic priest who worked as a chaplain for the police department took the book, and then it was never seen again. The investigation found that Robichaud probably ran away to avoid Union troops who were about to take over the city. However, this doesn't explain why she would leave behind valuable things or an unfinished meal. If it weren't for something that architectural historian Frederick Barnes found in 2003, the links between Malene Robichaud and Clara Carter might have stayed just that suggestive. Barnes took pictures of the old Robichaud home in Louisiana for a preservation project. By that time, it had been turned into a restaurant. During renovation work, contractors removed a section of water-damaged wall, revealing a hidden compartment containing a small wooden box. There was a daguerreotype inside that showed 12 women sitting in a semicircle with their faces clearly visible. There were 12 sets of initials and locations written on the back, such as CC, Virginia, and M, New Orleans. The most interesting thing was the date, December 21st, 1862, which was less than a month before the people went missing at Willow Creek. Barnes knew the picture could be important in history, so he called the Louisiana Historical Society. But after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, both the daguerreotype and his detailed notes were lost in the chaos. All that is left is a low-quality digital scan of a group of women in dark dresses with serious looks on their faces. You can tell which one is Clara Carter by looking at her locket portrait. It looks like they are in a fancy living room with a strange, round design on the wall behind them. Barnes's only published reference to the picture says that the women's right hands were in the same strange positions. Their index and middle fingers were extended, and their ring and little fingers were curled against their palms. This intriguing evidence points to the fact that what happened at Willow Creek Plantation was not just the work of a troubled widow, but part of a coordinated effort involving women from several southern states. We still don't know what their meetings were for, what kinds of ceremonies they held, or what happened to the people who were there. It's also strange that so much evidence related to the case has been lost, misplaced, or deliberately kept from the public over the years, whether because of bureaucratic carelessness, intentional suppression, or just the passage of time. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a forensic anthropologist, tried to look at the remains from the burial site in 1998. By that time, they had been moved to an unmarked part of Hollywood Cemetery. When Vasquez kept asking the State Historical Commission for help, she was told that the exact location of the reburial had been lost because of a mistake made by the administration. Her application for a research grant to study the case was turned down. One anonymous reviewer said that some historical issues, especially those that could be sensitive, are better left alone. The most unusual thing that happened in the Willow Creek case happened in 2010, when a suburban development was planned for an area that used to be wooded about 4 miles south of the original plantation site. Cemetery officials turned down her request to have the body exhumed because they wanted to show respect for the dead, even though the burial site was not marked. Ground-penetrating radar found what looked like another archaeological site during the first survey. This one had about 12 to 15 different formations, arranged in a pattern that was similar to the one found in 1968. But before archaeologists could start their work, the development company unexpectedly pulled out of the deal and sold the land to a private buyer, who immediately turned it into a protected woodland preserve that is permanently closed to the public. It has never been proven who this buyer is, even though they are using a number of shell companies to do business. Margaret Holloway, a local historian who has spent 20 years studying the Willow Creek case despite opposition from institutions, has what might be the most interesting theory about what happened. Holloway writes in a self-published book that has been shared with a small group of independent researchers that the group Clara Carter wrote about wasn't just a short-lived group that died with its members. It may have been an organization that lived on in some way after that. She talks about the pattern of hiding evidence, the strange private purchase of the second site, and the fact that several researchers who have looked into the case too deeply, like Marianne Woodward, Daniel Freeman, and Thomas Blackwood, either stopped working on it suddenly or ran into strange problems. Holloway writes, "What we're seeing with the Willow Creek case is not just the difficulty of historical research, but active intervention to control the narrative. We should not only ask what happened in 1862, but also who benefits from keeping those events hidden today. What legacy of Clara Carter's circle might still be operating in the shadows of power? Holloway's theories could be disregarded as conjectural, if not for one conclusive piece of verifiable evidence. A technician at the University of Virginia's Special Collections found a folder that had not been cataloged before during a digitization project in 2015. Inside was a single sheet of paper that looks like it came from Clara Carter's missing journal. The page, which is dated January 16, 1863, the day before her last recorded entry, has a passage that makes the whole case even more mysterious. M came this evening with the final instructions. The men have been prepared according to the sequence, though 2 required additional procedures after attempting to leave the property. The circle of chairs is arranged in the upper room, and the platform has been inscribed with the 64 symbols in the prescribed order. Tomorrow night, when the alignment is complete, the 12 of us will gather for the ceremony. M assures me that what awaits us is beyond ordinary understanding, not an ending as the uninitiated know it, but a transformation. The participants have been selected for their particular qualities, measured and evaluated over these months. Through this process, we will achieve our goal. Through this method, we will ensure continuation. The cycle will not be broken. We have verified the authenticity of this page by looking at the handwriting and the age of the paper, but its meaning is still up for debate. The references to participants, transformation, and especially the phrase, "Through this method, we will ensure continuation," point to something much more complicated than what was first thought. The arrangement of the site, the missing records of the 12 women, and the repeated numbers 12 and 34 in the case all make it a historical puzzle that has not been solved by normal methods. A few scholars who have talked about the Willow Creek case usually do so in the context of the Civil War, when social structures were falling apart and people, especially those like Clara Carter, who suddenly found themselves in positions of unchecked power, might act in ways that reflected the broader moral distortions of the slave system itself. This interpretation, though psychologically feasible, neglects the coordinated activities across various states and the ongoing attempts to conceal the case into the contemporary period. What took place at Willow Creek Plantation during the winter of 1862? It's disturbing enough that Clara Carter and 11 other rich Southern women were involved in some kind of strange ceremonial gathering with 34 enslaved men before an unknown event took their lives. But the broken evidence points to something that could be more complicated and scary. The careful selection process, the months of preparation, the repeated mentions of change, participants, and continuation, and the precise geometric arrangements of the chamber and the site all point to a belief system with a clear internal logic and a purpose that goes beyond just being strange or having a mental breakdown. Today, dozens of private homeowners own the land where Willow Creek Plantation used to be. None of them know what happened there in the past. The original plantation house site is now a small community park, featuring a playground and picnic area. There is no historical marker that says what might have happened there. The burial site that was found in 1968 is under the eastbound lanes of Interstate 64, where thousands of cars pass by every day. The second possible site is still safe behind tall fences and only has private property signs on it. Its exact location is not shown on public maps. Every few years, a new researcher finds bits and pieces of the Willow Creek story and tries to put them together into a coherent story. But they always run into the same problems: missing documents, institutions that don't want to help, and dead ends. These problems have been a part of investigations for more than a century. Some people give up their work, while others, like Margaret Holloway, keep going on the fringes of academic legitimacy by self-publishing their findings to small groups of specialized researchers. None of them have been able to get the whole story into the public's mind as a part of history. What we don't know about the Willow Creek case may be the most frightening thing about it. It's possible that this is not by accident, but by design. If you believe Clara Carter's last journal entry, she and her 11 friends were not planning an end, but a beginning. Through this method, we will ensure continuation. The cycle will not be broken. Whatever those words meant to the mistress of Willow Creek, they are a promise and a warning that some parts of history cannot be closed, and that some circles are hard to break. In 2018, a homeowner in the subdivision that now covers part of the old Willow Creek property found something strange while digging a pond in his backyard. He found a small silver object about 3 feet below the surface that he first thought was a coin. When I cleaned it, I saw that it was a polished bone button with a small symbol carved into it, a circle with 12 lines coming out of it. The owner of the artifact put a picture of it on a Civil War relics forum and asked for help identifying it. Moderators took down the post within 24 hours because it broke the community rules. When other users asked about the deletion, they didn't get a response. A local journalist who was looking into the incident got in touch with the homeowner. The homeowner said that someone who said they were from a historical preservation society had come to see him and offered to buy the button for an undisclosed amount. He accepted, signed a non-disclosure agreement, and has declined all further comment. The full truth of what happened at Willow Creek Plantation is still hard to find. It's like a whisper in the historical record, or a shadow that falls across the carefully built story of the past. Maybe that's how it will stay, or maybe, as Clara Carter seemed to think, some cycles are never really broken, just put on hold until the right conditions come up again. Researchers with the right credentials and reasons look at the silver locket with Clara Carter's portrait in it from time to time. It is still in its acid-free box in the Virginia Historical Society's archives. People who have held it say that the metal feels unusually cold, even if it has been in a warm room or hand for a long time. The conservation staff has noticed something else strange. Even though the locket is cleaned by professionals on a regular basis, it always develops a thin layer of tarnish in a certain pattern. The tarnish forms a circle of dark oxidation around the portrait, with 12 evenly spaced lines radiating outward. The senior conservator has given up trying to stop it and wrote in the condition report that some artifacts seem determined to tell their own stories in their own time.